Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 66, and it's Monday, July 15th, 2024. If this is the first time you're joining the show, glad to have you here. And if you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to see you coming back to get your fix of Cyber Threat Intel. Now, if you need to grab a snack or a drink to get you through the content, make sure you run and go do that before we keep going. And then also, if you want to see all the articles that we cover in the episodes, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. And you'll be able to find all that information on there. With that being said, let's go ahead and flip on over to my screen and get into the content. All right, so first article, CISA broke into U.S. federal agency, wasn't spotted for months, according to the Register. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, says a red team exercise at a certain unnamed federal agency in 2023 revealed a string of security failings that exposed its most critical assets. CISA calls these silent shield assessments. The agency's dedicated red team picks a federal civilian executive branch, an FCEB, agency to probe, and does so without prior notice, all while trying to simulate the maneuvers of a long-term hostile nation-state threat group. Pretty standard stuff, right? As far as a government, you're scared or worried, concerned about nation-states, and so you want to evaluate your systems and networks relative to the threat actors or the risks that you face. According to the agency's account of the exercise, the red team was able to gain initial access by exploiting an unpatched vulnerability, CVE 2022-21587, so something that's been around for a few years, with a CVSS score of 9.8 in the target agency's Oracle Solaris enclave, leading to what it said was a full compromise. Anytime you have a very severe vulnerability, a critical vulnerability, you should certainly resolve that, mitigate that, patch that, whatever you have to do to fix that. But also the fact that it's a 9.8 CVSS score and it's from 2022. We're in 2024 now, so it's been a couple years. You probably should have patched that a long time ago. Certainly concerning. The quote here, it says, after gaining access, the team promptly informed the organization's trusted agents of the unpatched device, but the organization took over 2 weeks to apply the available patch, CISA's report reads. Additionally, the organization did not perform a thorough investigation of the affected servers, which would have turned up IOCs and should have led to a full incident response. So it looks like this, so they go a little bit more into here. The initial intrusion was made January 25th, 2023. So I'll give them a little bit more leeway because thinking, the attack is in 2024 and the vulnerability was released in 2022, that's unbelievable. That's really, really bad. But the fact that it was made in 2023, we don't have the exact date as far as like when that was released, that vulnerability. But I mean, still, you should have patch management processes in place. You should certainly be patching relative to the criticality of that vulnerability, because that's just how it works. You can't just find a vulnerability and kind of let it sit out there for months and months and months. Critical vulnerabilities typically are within a week, maybe a couple weeks. You want to get those taken care of really, really quickly. Now, as you go down in the severity levels, so high, medium, low, informational, all the way to informational, you might not even correct the informational ones or the low vulnerabilities. You might just kind of leave them there because they might not pose a huge risk. But certainly with critical and high and a lot of times medium vulnerabilities, you are going to want to work to mitigate those and resolve those. Now, over 2 weeks to apply the patch. I think with this, they're basically saying, you should have done that within a week. in all honesty, 2 weeks in general to apply a patch across the board is not terrible. But again, when it comes to critical vulnerabilities and based on severity, you're going to have a patch management process and policy and plan and everything like that. And you have to abide by that or act in accordance with that and make sure that you're patching according to that schedule. CISA added this CVE to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog on February 2nd, 2023. So they added it pretty quickly after they were able to exploit it. Vulnerabilities added to the KEV catalog means a few things. First, they're serious, known to be exploited by cyber criminals, and could lead to serious consequences. Second, when bugs are added to the catalog, they also come with deadlines by which FCEB agencies have to patch them. So again, this is the patch management process. This is plan, policy, all those things. They're putting a date on those vulnerabilities when they have to be mitigated. That's standard practices across the board. It's not just within the government. Now, one thing that I'll say here too is this whole KEV catalog and just what the government finds as far as vulnerabilities in their different organizations and such is, I think that companies need to pay a little bit closer attention to those things. Now, when we're looking at what the government is finding, what they're exploiting, what they're doing, typically they're doing things for a reason. So especially when it comes to cybersecurity and the findings that they have, they're not just finding these out of the blue. There's a reason why they are aware of certain vulnerabilities or certain things being exploited, certain things being of such concern. So things like software vendors and those kinds of things. And so I think it will benefit you if you can pay closer attention to what they are saying. Obviously, everybody has their opinions and their perspective of the government and how that plays a role in our world today. But from a cybersecurity standpoint, you got to think about that. They know a lot as far as things that are being exploited around the world, and they do a lot of research and do all these kinds of things. They have a lot of resources to do that. And so especially if you're a smaller company or even a regular size, medium, large size company, you shouldn't just kind of ignore the advisories and the things that they put out there. I've seen plenty of companies do that, plenty of security teams just kind of ignore those advisories. And that is certainly a dangerous situation. You're kind of playing with fire with somebody that knows what's going on, and you're kind of just ignoring that advice. So certainly, word to the wise. All right, next article here. Critical XM bug bypasses security filters on 1.5 million mail servers. Census warns that over 1.5 million XM mail transfer agents, MTAs, instances are unpatched against critical vulnerability that lets threat actors bypass security filters. Again, a critical vulnerability here. Tracked as CVE 2024-39929 and patched by XM developers on Wednesday. So that's Wednesday of last week. The security flaw impacts XM releases up to including version 4.97.1. The vulnerability is due to incorrect parsing of multi-line RFC 2231 header file names, which can lead remote attackers can let remote attackers deliver malicious executable attachments into end user mailboxes by circumventing the MIME_file name extension blocking protection mechanism. As of July 10th, 2024, Census observes 1,567,109 publicly exposed XM servers running a potentially vulnerable version 4.97.1 or earlier, concentrated mostly in the United States, Russia, and Canada, the company added. So one thing that I want to point out here too is that anytime you're dealing with things around basically your perimeter of your network, so things like mailboxes, email is something that all users within your organization access. So when we're talking about things that can certainly pose a lot of risk, those definitely can. Because when when attackers are able to bypass filters or any kind of security mechanisms in something like email, then users are going to get the junk that we don't want them to get, that are going to carry malware, carry phishing attempts, whatever it is. They're going to be carrying these bad things that we don't want in our network. And once they get into the network or get into the mailboxes, that increases the likelihood that a user is going to click it, that they're going to go to the link, they're going to download the attachment, they're going to do something within that email that is going to then open your network up to an attack, let an attacker in, do those kinds of things. And then all of a sudden now you're in trouble because maybe you have ransomware in your network or something now. So it's very, very serious having these kind of essentially doors to your network or entry points to your network, and things that can bypass those filters that you have. You have to maintain those especially and make sure those are patched. Admins who cannot immediately upgrade XM are advised to restrict remote access to their servers from the internet to block incoming exploitation attempts. So again, do the things that are recommended by the vendors and make sure that you're applying patches and doing your patch management process to make sure that you're not staying vulnerable. MTA servers such as XM are often targeted in attacks because they're almost always accessible via the internet, making them easy to find potential entry points into a target's network. Again, I just said that, right? They're entry points into your network. They are like the doors to your house that you've just left open that they can exploit. And then they give some stats and some other information here about this. So, and they go ahead and rank the countries too. So definitely the United States by far. Next article, CDK Global said to have paid $25 million ransom after cyber attack. No! CDK Global reportedly paid a $25 million ransom in Bitcoin after its servers were knocked offline by crippling ransomware. Last week, CDK restored services to car dealerships across the U.S. after a 2-week outage caused by a cyber incident, and we covered this cyber incident on Cyber Threat Intel, that looked like a lot like a ransomware infection. Shutdown of CDK's software platform caused chaos for up to 15,000 car dealerships, including the Asbury, AutoNation, Group 1, Lithia, and Sonic chains, stopping sales going through and registrations being filed in some states. So we talked about this incident in particular. Again, so actually a couple times we talked about this, but the whole idea, especially of stopping your critical business processes and not being able to sell things, take payments, do all those critical things that you need to do in your organization. CDK hasn't yet disclosed how exactly it was able to get its business back online, but CNN cites sources who claim the software firm had to pay a ransom of $25 million to the ransomware operators. The ransom was actually paid just 2 days after the attack, we're told, and this is in the article, that would suggest CDK perhaps coughed up, as claimed, straight away to persuade the extortionists to not leak any data stolen during the infection and to just back off, and that it subsequently took several days to rebuild and restore services. So certainly you can tell a lot by kind of how these stories play out as far as what happened, what kind of attack it actually was, especially with notifications that companies make. A lot of times you can understand or kind of read between the lines as far as what they're saying and what the attack most likely is. It's crazy how much you can predict that. The more you see those and the better you get at it. It's generally a good idea to wipe or replace compromised machines. Absolutely. Even if you paid a ransom to decrypt and prevent the leak of any exfiltrated data, which will usually delay a restart of operations. So whenever you're compromised, okay, a computer gets compromised, you should be wiping that system. You should not be just letting it kind of go on with normal operation, because when we're looking at attacks and attack chains, one of the most common things that attackers do is they set up persistence. So they set up some kind of additional account, backdoor, something so they can get back into those systems, even if you've wiped what you think or what you know to be the initial infection vector. That does not mean that that is the only thing on that system. And that's something that especially less experienced professionals don't always understand, and they don't always think about, is this whole idea of just wiping the system. Sometimes you don't even want to restore backups because the backups might be compromised, or you don't know how far the backups were compromised, and maybe it's just easier to go ahead and rebuild that server or that system. So these are all things you have to think about, and things that you just can't ignore and kind of just keep going on with your day. Sometimes it's more work, but you need to do it because you want to get rid of that completely. You want to eradicate it completely. Nowadays, most ransomware victims don't pay their attackers, with just 29% having coughed up in Q4 last year. So 29%, that's pretty low, I guess, in consideration. But we've also seen countries going as far as banning the idea of paying these ransomware payments. So obviously there's pros and cons to that kind of situation. But just know that a lot of that stuff is going on. Those discussions continue in various countries, Australia, UK. There's several countries that have brought up the idea of completely banning the payments or needing to seek government approval in order to make those payments in an effort to really stop or slow down those groups. Why the AT&T phone records data breach? What the AT&T phone records data breach means for you. On Friday, AT&T said cybercriminals stole the phone records of nearly all of its customers, a data breach that will force the company to notify around 110 million people. AT&T said the stolen data includes records like which phone number a certain customer called and texted, the total count of calls and texts, and call duration for a 6-month period between May 1st, 2022 and October 31st, 2022. AT&T said the stolen data does not include any content of calls or texts, nor their time or date. For some of the affected customers, the cyber criminals were also able to steal cell site identification numbers linked to phone calls and text messages, according to AT&T. Why does that matter? Well, this means that potentially someone could use the information to figure out the approximate location of a customer when they made a certain call or sent a text, and perhaps infer sensitive information about their lives. AT&T blamed the incident on a recent breach at cloud service provider Snowflake, which has affected dozens of companies, including Ticketmaster, Santander Bank, and LendingTree subsidiary, quote, Wizard. So it's interesting that AT&T would blame Snowflake when all of the articles and all the information that we've seen related to the Snowflake incident, which we've also talked about a lot on this show, was primarily linked to customers of Snowflake not enabling two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. That has been the number one reason why accounts in Snowflake were breached. But AT&T wants to blame them for this. So I find that interesting to kind of shift blame when you have a major breach. Doesn't seem very very genuine on their part. Quote here: the attackers know exactly who you're likely to pick up a call from, who you're likely to text back, how long you communicate with that person, and even potentially where you were located during that conversation due to metadata that was stolen, said Toback. So think about this for scammers too. That can be certainly valuable because we see a lot of scammers that will disguise their phone number with caller ID and do all these different things. It could just be somebody that goes and downloads an app from the App Store and changes the caller ID to maybe a friend that you have or something like that in order to do more of a targeted attack. So there's a lot of value in a lot of that information, especially the more and more that we're connected in this world. Quote here says, I think everyone should be angry about this and demand better from the telcos. Absolutely. It's not enough to say, oh, by the way, your data was taken. We're sorry and are taking this very seriously, Sandvik told TechCrunch. I think that's true too. I think in a lot of cases, especially the larger companies, when there's data breaches, we kind of we're kind of desensitized to it, so we don't we just kind of accept what these large companies say as far as, well, it happened, but we're taking all the measures we need to. Maybe here's the year of credit monitoring or 2 years of credit monitoring. So I think there's a lot of concern with how how laxed we are with some of these breaches, especially the ones that are of huge magnitude. 110 million records breached. There's got to be some kind of penalty for that. That's just unexcusable. So, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, again in another episode. Next article, Rite Aid disclosed data breach following ransom hub attack. American drug store chain giant Rite Aid suffered a data breach following a cyber attack in June conducted by the Ransom Hub ransomware group. The group is the third largest drugstore chain in the United States with over 2,000 stores and ranked number 148 in Fortune 500 in 2022. Quote here says, Rite Aid experienced a limited cybersecurity incident in June, and we're finalizing our investigation. We take our obligation to safeguard personal information very seriously, and this incident has been a top priority, reads a statement issued by Rite Aid. Together with our third-party cybersecurity partner experts, we have restored our systems and are fully operational. We're sending notices to impacted customers. We take our obligation to safeguard personal information very seriously, and this incident has been a top priority. We appreciate your patience until we can provide additional information, the company said. The Ransom Hub Group claimed responsibility for the data breach and announced the theft of 10 gigabytes of customer information, around 45 million records of people's personal information. So again, a pretty substantial breach. Now, this is the kicker here. On May 2023, Rite Aid suffered another cyber attack. It was one of the hundreds of organizations that were breached in the Move It hacking campaign by the Clop ransomware gang. So again, you've heard me say this before. When your company gets breached, especially by certain groups, it is always going to be tested again. That's why you do want to wipe systems. You want to have those lessons learned and really do that deep root cause analysis to understand what happened and why it happened. But, for large companies, and we'll see kind of what happens as more information comes out, if more information does come out, but large companies really need to do a very good job of understanding how they were breached. Again, I feel like in a lot of cases, some of these teams are laxed, and I'm not saying, this team specifically because I don't know, but the consistency of repeat breaches of companies is quite alarming across the board. Whenever we see repeat breaches in different companies, I think that we have to be concerned, what are these companies doing to actually take care of the problem? Are they actually finding what the issue was? Do they have just so much tech debt because they've, grown so rapidly in their organization that they just can't fix it all? Do they need some incentive, an incentive to maybe fix some of this stuff a little bit quicker? So maybe some timeline kind of fines or something like that. They have to fix certain things within 6 months or a year or something. That's always a danger when your company grows so rapidly. And I'm not saying specifically in this case, but that does come to mind, is if a company grows very rapidly or they change their direction very rapidly, some of that tech debt doesn't get resolved immediately or ever. Maybe it takes a long time to get rid of that stuff. So there's a lot of thoughts going through my head, but certainly the repeat attack, that, and successful attack at that, is always concerning about what those companies are doing in order to resolve the problem. Are they actually taking the steps necessary, or are they just kind of covering things up in a sense? So that's the last article for today. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 66. and it is Monday, July 15th, 2024. If you want to check out all the articles that we covered in this episode or some other articles that were added to the feed, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. You can find all that information there. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.